I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
of America,
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with
liberty and justice for all.
First item is the approval of agenda.
To ensure I'm on the right one, the agenda for tonight is 2 management reports, the proposed house plans, and the regulatory for 1383. Okay, I make approval. Motion to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Givens, seconded by Councilmember Lopez. Roll call.
Councilmember Alvarado,
Other one.
Yes.
Givens,
Yes.
Lopez,
Yes.
Espinoza,
Yes.
and Prout.
Yes. Public comment. We have any public comments that's submitted tonight? Nothing?
I don't see hands risen, so no comment at this time.
Okay, moving on to management reports. The first item is the proposed house plans for tentative tract number 7375, located at the southeast corner of North Riker Street and West Tulare Avenue.
Certainly, Mayor and Council, just to introduce this new format, we received the house plans for this particular subdivision project. And this will eventually come back to you for final approval, but the applicant wishes to get some initial feedback as to the proposed elevations. And so this item is simply for you to review and provide comment. It's not an action item, but it does give you an opportunity to provide some comment to the applicant of their proposed initial evaluations. So Wayne, you want anything further?
Wayne, you're on mute.
Oops.
He's always doing that.
How many times will I do that? Honorable Mayor, members of the Shafter City Council. This tentative tract map is located at the southeast corner of West Tulare Avenue and North Riker Street. You'll see in your staff report, there's an exhibit showing the location of the tentative tract map. And then exhibit 2 shows the actual tract map that your council approved back in September of 2020. And you can see there's 10 large lots. They average just under 12,000 square feet. They all front on North Riker Street. And the developer, Mr. Gunter, is getting ready to process a development agreement for the approval of these house plans and some other city requirements so he can record the final map. And he submitted these house plans to get your initial thoughts and any input you may have on the plans themselves. And I'll go over each plan. But I would like to point out that Mr. Gunter is here tonight and he's available for any questions you may have. So the first house plan in your staff report is Echo Series 1446. And that number 1446 refers to the actual livable area under the house plan. That doesn't include the square footage of the garage, front porch, rear patio. And you'll see that the floor plan for that. And then you also see 2 elevations for that house plan. And one is labeled modern and one is labeled Spanish. And on all these house plans, you'll see that the design is fairly square and the rooftop is flat. And Mr. Gunter indicated to me that the purpose of that is to facilitate putting solar panels on top of the house. That'll make it more easy to do. So that's the first house plan. Then the second one, again, has 2 elevation drawings, modern and Spanish, and this size is 1,690 square feet. And you'll see that in the last one, the master bedroom was on one side of the house, the kitchen and living room area was dead center, and then the 2 bedrooms were on the other side of the house. And this one, it's a little different. Master bedroom still on one side, bigger living area, kitchen area, and then a dining room right in the middle. And then all 3 bedrooms are on the other side of the house. And for Echo Series 1860, that's the 1,861 square feet of livable area under this plan. Again, you have modern and Spanish, and the modern is very different than the previous 2. And here the floor plan is a bigger living room area, kitchen, and a rather large dining room area. And then the master bedroom, and 2 of the bedrooms are on one side, and then the 3rd bedroom is up front and center. And then the final house plans is Echo Series 2263. That's 2,263 square feet of livable area. Again, modern and Spanish elevations, a little bit different design for the modern. We got a large kitchen area, living room area, dining room area. The master bedroom and all 3 bedrooms are essentially on the same side of the house. So those are the 4 designs for this development. Staff likes the designs. They think they're different and unique for Shafter, something we really haven't seen in the city of Shafter. But they seem that they would work for those particular 10 lots. And that concludes staff's report, and glad to take any question, comments, and include Mr. Gunter in the discussion if you'd like. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Clausen. Does anyone have any comments up here on the dais?
It's unique. I can't say I don't like them. I think my concern is, do they fit there? I think the typical home in that area, I don't know. I guess maybe if you guys believe it's going to sell and do well in that area, it just feels so out of place with what is there right now. You know, I guess it's your typical house with a California gable, same square footage. The interior layout makes sense to me, and that's what you're starting to see a lot more of. I see some split wing in here and what have you. It's just the exterior with that parapet roof style thing going on. It just seems a little different and out of place for the area.
Well, you know, the floor plan itself, everyone has a different likes in floor plans, and he does offer several that are pretty unique in their own way, and people can choose what they want. But I have to go along with the area because they appear to be more desert looking, and there are no, I mean, they're flat top even. I don't know. I don't know if the people in that area would even appreciate having those when the other area is already established. I don't know. I used to have a difficult time with it. In that, especially in that area. I mean, maybe if we had a special area for them. Anybody else?
Well, I live in that area, a little bit down the street from there. Now that property used to be owned by the Shafter Recreation and Parks District, correct, Wayne?
That's correct.
Yeah, and I remember what was the original plan for that, but obviously it's been years since then. And what they were going to turn it into, which was basically one home. I think at one time somebody wanted to build like a compound almost, and there was a lot of concerns from the residents that speak to me around that area. So to see this compared to what was going to be there or what was thought to be there, it's a lot. I guarantee you, more of the homeowners will like this than to see one single family home there, or just an empty lot compared to what they got right now. Because I know the empty lot ain't cutting it either. It's a fire hazard during the summertime when the grass wasn't upkept. So to see these homes, it's not bad. Do we know the roundabout price of these homes?
Well, let me jump in on that a little bit. The homes are going to be designed and built for entry-level purchasers. FHA as a financial guideline that I'm trying to keep all of these homes within so that people can qualify them with a minimum of down payment and a preferred interest rate. Pricing on these homes are going to range from $290,000 at the smaller size, about $370,000, $375,000 on the larger home. A lot of this is going to be dictated by supply of materials. Some of this stuff is kind of a bouncing ball at the present time. But my proposals right now is in the high 2s to mid high 3s. I'm not going to have anything over 4. I can absolutely assure you, because the guideline on FHA, they max out 374,000.
Okay. I appreciate it, sir. Thank you.
I tend to agree with Councilmember Givens. I think the contrast of the houses that are going to be built versus the houses that are there is it's quite a big difference. So I mean, you're going to have one side of one block that looks the same, and then everything else around it looks the same. So I don't know how that's going to fit.
Don't get me wrong. I like it. I always like different. So do I like the style? Absolutely. Would I love to see this built? Absolutely. I think I would just, will it sell in that area? I think so. It's just going to look different compared to what's there right now. And different's not bad, but again, you're taking something and completely morphing it to something very different. I'd love to see one of these styles or both styles built somewhere that has an area that's just perfectly suited for that. I don't know, it just seems a little out of place in that tract. Nice homes, great interior. I like the design. I like the interior floor plan. I like what there's showing there. I think price range is pretty decent as well. It just seems like the exterior is a little different for that area.
Are there any of these homes available near Shafter or in Kern County?
You're talking about any of these particular designs?
Yes, sir.
No, I'm sorry. These designs were influenced by a housing subdivision in Palm Springs. And yes, they kind of do depict the desert plaza idea. But a lot of that has to do with the new requirements of lawns and grass and plants and all the things that go into the ecological meaning about building homes. My homes are going to be built with the idea that solar and the construction criteria is within the home with foam and different things that improve the physical characteristics of the house are going to be set up to where they are different. I totally agree with everybody's opinion of that. They are different. But if you think about it, the homes that are to either side of this little 3-acre spot are the backs of the homes, not the fronts of the homes. So anybody going into their neighborhood, they're going to be in their neighborhood. It's totally different than my little 3.5 acres or whatever it is there. It's really going to be a separate, and I know it's not very large, it'll be a separate little neighborhood to the two that are presently there.
Anyone have any other questions? No. Okay, at this time, I guess we're just taking these under review, and you have any questions of us?
No, ma'am. I think really appreciate you taking the time to let me join in the conversation. Certainly appreciate you taking a look at the project that I'm wanting to pursue. I might leave with one other note. There's a reason for the parapet roof. When you use a gable type roof, your percentage of sun fellowship, solar standing, is only good for portions of the day. With the parapet, I can put the solar system in it to where it is 100% active from the time sun gets to 11 o'clock, 8 o'clock, all the way till it goes down. And believe me, from the standpoint of efficiency and getting the best amount travel rate on your electric bill, the parapet roof will work for you much better than a hip roof. And I do thank you a lot for
Right.
here with you today.
You know, and I'd like to just share too, it isn't the fact of the landscaping, because drought resistance seems to be very popular today, and it's important because of the water issues. And we have that in our development out on 7th Standard, that we encourage that. I mean, they're very small spaces, whereas these people are going to have yards. I mean, they're going to have space because of the way that it's laid out and the way you have it there. But I don't know. I just wonder if the neighborhood and everyone will feel good about it. And maybe you could go talk to some of them, show it to them and see what they think. Because I'm not totally against change, because everyone has a different light, but when you're putting a set of 10 homes in there and you've got this look, I'm not sure how it's going to be received. And I think you want to feel good about it as well as us. So
Oh, absolutely.
certainly. Very good. All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
No other comments? We'll move on. Presentation for the City of Shafter proposed plan to meet regulatory compliance of California Senate Bill number 1383. Short-lived climate consultants, methane emissions, dairy and livestock, organic waste, and landfills.
Sorry, Mayor and Council. As you know, SB 1383 took an effect a few years ago, and it does have what we would call unfunded mandates that the state has imposed on us. We felt it was prudent for us to bring this matter to you of the proposed plan as we move forward with implementation. We do have a January 1 of 2022 implementation date per the legislation that was signed into law. And so this evening, between Mike James and our consultant from our three consultants, Carrie will provide the staff report and the PowerPoint presentation. And at the end, we'd like to get some direction from you for future policy discussion to bring back to you. So with that, Mike.
Honorable Mayor, members of the Shafter City Council, thank you for your time to participate in this study session. We're here to learn more about Can you hear me okay? All right. We're here to learn about SB 1383 and discuss our plan towards compliance. Staff has briefed the council, I believe, in the past about looming mandates with regard to SB 1383, which are centered around organic waste diversion programs. Unlike past mandates, this one will impact every resident, business, and industry within the city. Some businesses have already been working towards SB 1383 compliance with previous mandates. And the residents have mostly been spared for the past 30 years or so with recycling mandates. The council previously authorized using the professional services of R3 Consulting to assess our current policies and how this mandate will impact us and what we can do to prepare for it. The initial phase of this action plan has been completed. The R3 has completed their assessment, and they're here tonight virtually to walk us through what they've learned about the city and what we can do to prepare. Also with us tonight is Josh Nelson with Best and Krieger to provide some more legal background on the looming mandate. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Baxter, if I may.
Thank you. Let me share my presentation for you. All right. So good afternoon. Thank you for having me here today. As Michael just said, I'll tell you a little bit more about the implementation needs for SB 1383. Let's see if here. I'll just kind of run through here. Today, I'm going to begin by covering the history of California solid waste legislation, new components that are being introduced in recent years, and then we'll discuss some primary focus areas to help provide you with how new programs can be structured to meet California legislation requirements and solutions to developing a successful collection rate structure. So as mentioned, California's got a robust history, 30 years in the making of unregulated or unfunded mandates. Starting with AB 939, there was an 11-year implementation schedule to meet a 50% diversion goal of recycling. And CalRecycle continues to play a central role in addressing climate change through diversion efforts. Mandates through the years focus on source reduction, reduce, reuse, recycle, reducing greenhouse gases, waste diversion, landfill diversion, organic diversion, and recycling programs. So first of the unfunded mandates was AB 939. This required planning documents required to develop and implement an integrated waste management plan by the county, and the city was to put together a source reduction recycling elements and countywide siting plans. There's waste diversion mandates to all cities and counties and regional agencies. They were all responsible for plans and implementing the program starting at 25% diversion in 1989, and then by 2000, having a recycling diversion of 50%. This then led into AB 32, which is the Global Warming Solutions Act, which required greenhouse gas emissions to be reduced from to the 1990 levels by December 31st of 2020. It also set goals for reducing greenhouse gas emissions contributed to climate change, and the Air Resource Board led the agency for this implementation. More recently, we've got AB 341 and 1826, as well as AB 1594. These newer regulations have been passed in our industry to mandate commercial and multifamily residents in subscribing to recycling and organics collection services. On the jurisdiction side, the city's required identified cover generators provide recycling and organic collection programs, do outreach and education, and monitor the compliance, as well as report back to CalRecycle. On the green waste side, AB 1594 changed how green waste was counted as diversion, and as of 2020, that no longer counts as diversion if you use it to cover a landfill as alternative daily cover. But it still does, but it does count as disposal, basically. So then what we're here for tonight is SB 1383. This is the most recent of unfunded mandates. Up until now, incremental changes to state law have been passed over time. SB 1383 builds on those legislations. AB 1826, which I just talked about, which is the organics piece. It kind of led us into 1383. However, 1383 has some more stringent requirements on it. Sorry, lost my point. So building on 1826, there's now a requirement to actually enforce the requirement to have organics collected, not just provided. And it also includes edible food recovery piece as well. So food that can actually be eaten should be provided to a recovery facility rather than taken to be composted. So this is the timeline that SB 1383 has within the regulations. Back in January 2020, the goal was to reduce down to 50% of organics disposal from the 2014 levels that were identified by CalRecycle. Back in July of 2020, CalRecycle and the Air Resource Board measured the progress that had been made, identified that the state still was not hitting that 50% reduction. So even before SB 1383 fully was implemented, they decided we're going to go back to 1826 and require that not just the 4 cubic yard and greater business generators are required to have organics and recycling service, but we're also going to drop it down to 2 cubic yards to 4 cubic yards as well, have to have that organic service. Starting in just 10 months, January 2022, the state's going to begin enforcing and penalizing jurisdictions for not having an enforcement mechanism in place to have that organic service being provided. Come January 2024, that expands to your city will have to actually enforce on the businesses and haulers for not providing service or delivering material for processing. And then by January 2025, the goal is to have actually met 75% reduction in disposal of organics, as well as adding on the recovery of edible food for hungry people, 20% of that material that is not currently being recovered.
Hey, sorry to interrupt, Carrie. January 2022, I think we've talked about this before, and I see some familiar faces on Zoom as well. What are the penalties? I think it's the same
city
laugh that I heard
itself.
before.
For the city itself, it can be as much as $10,000 a day.
That the state would fine the city.
The state could fine the city for not having an enforceable mechanism in place. And what they define as an enforceable mechanism can be updating your ordinance, your city ordinance, to state that all customers are required to have organic collection. It could be updating your collection agreements with your haulers, with American Refuse and Varner Brothers, to require that they provide organic service to all of their customers in one way or another.
So pretty much there has to be a place for every customer to be able to drop off organic waste. Does it mandate that it's by house, or can it also be in the collective like an alley? Meaning, if there's a 3-yard organic waste bin at the end of every street, I'm not saying that's the answer, but do they define that detail, or is it just have something available to each resident?
It has to be provided to each customer. However, you're absolutely right in saying that we could put it at the end of each alley if that is feasible, and you're not going to have rodents get in and not going to have scavengers trying to get into those containers. Maybe have a locking mechanism on the containers or something along those lines. That absolutely is an option.
So it's not just about, I'm sorry for asking questions.
That's
it's
fine.
not just about having a policy in our code. It's actually having these items here. So we're talking 9 months.
10
Programs in
minus
place.
a day.
But not physical bins in place.
Not necessarily, but I think the key thing is the enforcement side of this. I mean, who is complying and who's not complying? I think the only way you really know for sure is if you provide each individual container, and then that we can monitor participation at that level. When you have a shared facility or a drop-off facility, and you're not meeting the diversion goals, I mean, you really don't know what your course of action is as far as how do you go back and figure out who's contributing and who's not, or who's holding up their end of the bargain.
Theoretically, because of what we do in the industrial park, we're already meeting those diversion goals. We just don't have something in place to quote unquote house the rest of the residents. So even if there wasn't as high enough, what's the word, inclusivity with the residents, we put an ordinance out there, we still are meeting those diversion goals, right?
We're meeting those diversion goals because everyone has pretty much their own container, and we can, our franchise haulers who are really in place right now with the commercial customers to represent us and make sure we're meeting our participation goals. The reason why we're able to do that is because we have a mechanism to monitor what they're doing and what they're generating on an individual basis.
Gotcha. So we're kind of halfway there. We just need the rest of the program in place, the writing, if you will, right?
We need, with respect to the programs that we have right now, with the franchise hauling that we have right now, we need to incorporate this mandate into our existing franchise agreements if that's the direction the council wants to pursue. But in the core city, residential in particular, we have to looks like we're going to completely have to change the way we handle this type of waste. And we're going to likely have separate programs and separate containers to make sure that we're properly diverting that from the organics from the waste stream.
Gotcha. Thank you. Sorry for the interruption.
How about we just let her finish the presentation, then we'll see what staff is at, and then we'll see where our shortfall is, then we'll deal with that.
Thank you, Carrie. I appreciate you answering that.
Perfect, thank you. So I'm going to go into enforcement next. That should probably help a bit here. Oh, did I skip this? No, here we are. Okay, so local agency responsibilities. The enforcement process of jurisdictions is a little bit different than what is currently required under AB 939 and 341 and 1826, where it was more of a good faith effort. Like many solid waste and recycling regulations, local jurisdictions and regional agencies can be issued a violation to be subject to enforcement for failure to comply with individual aspect of the regulation. This is uniquely different from AB 939 enforcement structure, where the jurisdiction's overall enforcement was to achieve a specific target and reviewed in arrears. Like most regulatory enforcement programs, enforcing agency, which is CalRecycle, will have discretion to determine the level of penalty necessary. And like I mentioned, it can be up to $10,000 a day beginning in January 1st, 2022 against a jurisdiction. The enforcement mechanisms are described as franchise agreement language, municipal code updates, or even just city policy updates requiring enforcement of the haulers and generators. One thing to note, local jurisdictions are not required to enforce until 2024. So even though you'll be penalized for not having something in writing saying that you will enforce, you don't have to start enforcing until January 1st, 2024. You just have to provide the service. CalRecycle will also be assessing penalties for failure to maintain an implementation record or not having an edible food recovery program established. So between January 2022 and December 2023, what your city will need to do is identify businesses that are in violation and provide them with educational materials to those generators, focusing during those first 2 years on educating the generator. And the goal is to make sure every generator has an opportunity to comply before the enforcement by the city when it becomes mandatory in 2024. After January 2024, jurisdictions will need to begin taking progressive enforcement against organic waste generators that are not in compliance. So you might have a code enforcement officer that would have to go out and actually talk to those customers that are subscribe to service. This approach allows for notification of the generator, provides ample time for the generator to comply before penalties are required to be issued by the jurisdiction. CalRecycle sets maximum time frame for the jurisdiction on when you have to issue a notice of violation and when you have to issue penalties to the generator. But each jurisdiction has the flexibility to develop its own enforcement process within those parameters. At the end of the day, enforcement is the local agency's responsibility. So jurisdictions will need to adopt, like I had mentioned, an ordinance or similarly enforceable mechanism that's consistent with these regulatory requirements, and begin planning now, because we only have about 10 more months before it's really required to be something put in writing in place. So now on to a little bit more. I feel like I skipped something on you guys. Oh, primary focus areas. I did skip. I was talking about the enforcement. I wasn't on the right slide. I'm sorry. Let's go into the next. Here we go. So the inspection requirements on top of the enforcement that I was just talking about. Just to dive a little bit deeper, jurisdictions are required to have enforcement and inspection programs These would include like an annual compliance review, similar to what's currently happening with AB 1826, monitoring to verify that customer subscription is being provided or that they're self-hauling. And then this can be done through like a desktop audit where you can just review reports from your hauler, verify that service is being provided, or that they're complying through other means, like backhauling from grocery stores. City would also have to conduct route reviews of the commercial and residential areas to verify subscription. And this can be done through like a random selection of containers to check for contamination. All routes must be reviewed annually. And provide education to anyone where you do identify any contamination. This doesn't mean every container has to be looked at every single year, but it does say it's kind of open, and CalRecycle has not really answered the question very well. What it says in the regulation is sufficient number of route reviews and inspections of entities to adequately determine overall compliance. So basically, overall, starting out with a robust education program building off of AB 1826 monitoring is going to minimize the amount of future enforcement actions that'll be needed. So now that we've covered the enforcement side of things, some of the programs that should be considered when negotiating through a franchise agreement, if that's the direction you guys choose to go through, we focus on typically bundling collection rates so that your single family customer, as they currently do, have the garbage bundled with recycling. Most cities throughout the state have all three, actually, garbage, recycling, and organics bundled together in one rate. But also doing the same for your commercial side so that they'll have just a general 96 or 64 gallon recycling and a 20 or 32 gallon organic container to meet the absolute minimum requirements. And then changing contract language from saying shall offer to must provide the service. Contamination protocols would need to be added in to make sure that they're the haulers providing notice of violation, taking pictures when there are issues, and potentially charging contamination fees if there are problems with contamination. Another piece of SB 1383 is a procurement requirement where you have to actually purchase back the compost or mulch that's created from the material, that kind of making a loop and using that mulch. So you could work that into the contract as well to have free mulch or compost pickup days. Also having dedicated staff to provide outreach and education and new containers and signage. So for example, in Half Moon Bay, a new contract that was approved about 3 years ago, customers are provided with recycling and organics at all levels, single family, multifamily, and commercial. They have diversion requirements, so organics can no longer be used as ADC. And they have funding in there for a half-time recycling specialist staffed by the city. And then in more recent years, this was actually back in April or May this year, of 2020, the city of El Cajon also negotiated a new contract. And in this, we found by having longer term extensions, rate increases were able to be limited. And then the hauler added in, obviously, the similar bundled rates and contamination monitoring as well. So SB 1383 cost elements for the program. There's a number of them to consider when you're putting together the collection rate. There's container labeling costs. There's a requirement within SB 1383 that states that The containers for trash have to be black or gray. The recycling has to be blue, and organics is green. And then there's specific labeling that allows you to understand what goes into each one of those containers. So hopefully throughout the state, we'll have a little bit better understanding going forward. Again, I talked about contamination monitoring, outreach and education, teaching your customers what material goes where and how to make that all happen. And there's an added cost to having a code enforcement officer, since the regulations have significant penalties for non-compliance. And then also the number of days of violations that it's occurred, just being able to enforce those on the city side as well. Routing costs are calculated based on the number of accounts that will be receiving the service and the distance to and from the facility. So the more customers you have having this organic collection, you may be able to spread the cost a little bit easier. And then also depending on where you're processing the material may affect that customer rate as well. So will customer rates increase? I mean, so CalRecycle has written this regulation without the thought in mind of what that's going to do to customer rates. Specifically, they've said we need to meet our target, and this is regardless of what it's going to cost anybody. All jurisdictions must have enforceable mechanisms and ordinance franchise agreement. Penalties can go anywhere from $50 to $500 per day for businesses, and good faith effort's not going to be accepted. So ultimately what we've found is we really need to include new language in contracts that this must be provided. It's not just a shall offer. And the diversion programs are going to be mandatory. I feel like I already talked about what's going to be in your customer rate. So you've got collection costs, you've got your organic processing fees, which is actually taking the organic material to be processed, the recyclable material fees, your landfill tipping fees. And then there can also be franchise fees, or SB 1383 actually allows for there to be a specific SB 1383 fee included within the customer rate to help recoup the cost of the city's expenses. So as jurisdictions implement and expand these programs to meet the regulations introduced in SB 1383, there's new challenges emerging. We're regularly asked how to set appropriate rates and how to pay for the required organic collection programs. This can be done by understanding what's in a customer rate, like I just described. Jurisdictions are also asking how to enforce participation. I think the easiest way is to do this through a franchise agreement or by negotiating a contract with your current haulers to incorporate that collection of the added organic collection container. And then there's the actual participation that'll have to come through the education and outreach. So implementation over this next 10-ish months or so. As I mentioned earlier, we've got about 10 months before SB 1383 is supposed to be implemented and in place. I know we kind of talked a little bit about CalRecycle and are they going to really enforce it right away in day one? They do have, and I think it's in your council agenda packet as well, kind of their process with not meeting the requirements of SB 1383. So they do have a timeline of how they would penalize the city, and it's not going to be on day one. It may take 3 months before they actually have met with the city and said you're not in compliance, and then they've got a process they have to go through, notice of violation and such. But on the city side, things that would need to take place are really just kind of crunching the numbers, identify what the actual cost impacts are going to be, if you have to hire a code enforcement officer, if you need to negotiate contracts, updating your municipal code just to incorporate that all customers are required to have the service, and preparing an RFI if that is the route that you decide to go, to work with the current haulers or a new hauler potentially to collect organic materials. And then just putting together a plan of how to get from here to January 1st and make sure you've hit all the different things that are within SB 1383. And finally, if there is a rate adjustment at any point because of this, Prop 218 hearing and noticing would have to take place most likely sometime before the rate increase takes place itself. So that was all I had. Were there any other questions? I know it was a lot of information.
Mike, did you have anything?
No, I don't have anything to add. This is just an initial step. We, R3 Consulting did an assessment of the programs that we currently operate in-house and with franchise haulers. They're basically what we're looking at is some options moving forward would be potentially renegotiating our franchise hauling agreements in our outlying areas, the commercial industrial areas outside the core city, and incorporating SB 1383 into those agreements. We have another option of seeking proposals from a hauler to perform SB 1383 service throughout the city, not just the business parks but also the core city. But the more likely scenario is that we're going to go through a process here, and we're going to submit some alternatives and some cost scenarios to the council at future meetings, and we'll share that with you in the public. But I think the most likely scenario is that we'll, for the outlying areas outside the core city, it's going to be in our best interest to work with our existing haulers and get us into compliance as quickly as possible in those areas. The core city obviously is going to require the most amount of public outreach because the impacted customers, the residential specifically, are going to be impacted the most. They're going to have to change their routines. We're one of the very few that I know municipalities that offer twice a week refuse collection with no green can or no mandatory blue card. So I can tell you that based on what I know, I think we're going to have to offer at least the green container. But we may want to consider also what the cost might be to add a blue card and just go three card system. But there's a lot of work to get done. We were here tonight to introduce you to this topic and get you thinking about it. And from now until the end of the year, when we really have to be in a position to enforce these programs that are required, you can direct your questions to me, the city manager. Again, this is an initial step. We're going to more than likely be before you in the coming months to adopt an ordinance. Regardless of the programs that we ultimately adopt and enforce, we have to come before you with an ordinance to state that we'll commit to complying with this mandate. And then from that point, between then and the end of the year, we're going to have to not only consider programs, develop programs, but we're going to have to put them before the public and make sure that they're approved and funded with potentially new rates.
The blue can is not being asked of right now, right?
That's my understanding. The emphasis with this particular mandate is organics. More than likely, we probably would want to find out from haulers, what the blue card option might impact, how that might impact a typical service bill for our residential customers in particular, because right now the commercial customers have essentially been complying with blue card programs, and slowly but surely organic waste programs have been more stringent with the 1826. Those apply to commercial customers, but yes, I think it would be in our best interest to get a pretty comprehensive proposal from multiple haulers and service options and how that might complement what we currently do.
So for the folks who recycle their cans right now, right? Just talking blue. If they were to force the blue, if this comes out where they're saying, no, you have to do that, what happens to those residents? The ones who say, hey, I'm already recycling. Theoretically, they're not part of the diversion. Is it the word diversion? Yes. So what happens? Do they have to go into the blue can even though they're already doing it on their own?
Well, as far as I know, that there's, similar to what's being implemented right now with commercial waste diversion, which includes blue carts. There are some self-haul options, and through our hauler, we offer a self-certification process. It's pretty stringent, and I'll maybe the haulers are observing. I'm not sure if they're willing to comment on that process, but I'm not, to be perfectly frank, I'm not sure if the state's going to be that receptive moving forward with self-hauling certification. We're just going to have to wait and see on that.
So Mike, right now, this is just an introduction for the council, correct?
Correct.
So the plan is that, the idea is that from here forward, staff is going to create a plan, or does staff already have a plan, or the staff is still working on a plan?
We have the, through this assessment that R3 Consulting has prepared, we have options. Now that we know what our options are, more than likely we'll be before the council in the future to recommend or get request authorization to seek competitive proposals for multiple scenarios. And then we'll be before you after that to make recommendations. And at that point, once the council feels comfortable with the new programs that need to be implemented, there likely will be a Prop 218 process that'll require us to approve the rates that are necessary to fund those new programs.
And we have to the end of the year of 2021.
Essentially, yes.
Okay.
We're planning, there was some speculation about whether the state is really going to follow through on this timeline. I can tell you I participated in workshops focused specifically on this topic, and the pandemic is slowing down the economy, but it's not slowing down regulations. And they think it's in the state's best interest, regardless of the economic fallout of COVID, that we follow through because of the perceived environmental benefits of conducting these programs.
So I would see if maybe it's possible, maybe at every meeting that we have, part of your report, like you do the water report, maybe give us a report on where we're at with this prop or SB 1383. And if we're falling behind, maybe we might have to do a special meeting, just give you the whatever you need to make sure we don't get into a position that we have to do a quick decisions towards the end of the year because the laws have changed.
Certainly, I think given that all that we have yet to accomplish, I think it would be in all of our best interest to make sure this is a reoccurring topic. You may not be asked to take action at every meeting. In fact, you probably likely won't, but I think you need to be informed at every meeting how we're progressing. I can tell you, you'll likely see an ordinance on your agenda within the next couple of months at the latest. But this is going to be a lot of things going on at once. We're going to be, while we're working on the ordinance, and we'll be also kind of developing request for proposals that, as I stated, will encourage different scenarios and maybe outside the box kind of thinking that things that we haven't even thought of or discussed. And hopefully we can find the most innovative solution possible to make the cost impacts as minimal as possible.
Yeah, that's good. I appreciate that. And because I think the last thing is that we don't want to be in a position at the end of the year and then we're put in a corner that, hey, the next meeting we got to raise something up to the consumer or something, in a situation that we didn't have enough time to think it through or work it through.
And that's quite frankly why R3 is with us, because I'll be honest, we just don't have the time or resources in-house to stay on top of this and develop everything that needs to be done on schedule. Yeah. So that's our intent.
Okay, thank you very much.
Still, what would be helpful for us, council, as Mike has said, is we'll bring back to you an action plan for you to approve so that we know what those steps are going to be, so we know what action to take. We're not piecemealing it to you. And then that way we'll just give you updates on how we're doing progress on that action plan. But I think for us, given the timeline we're in and all the other workload that we have, would be beneficial to bring back to you an action plan that you can approve so that we know clearly what direction you want to go. based on the recommendations we provide.
Any other comments from council?
Yeah, I got more of a comment. This is going to require a lot of education for the public, a lot of education, because they already see this. They always see our trash and sewer and all that all in one along with water, and they think we're the highest anywhere there is. Believe me, I hear it all the time. And now we're going to add more to it. We're not going to add more to it. We're made to add more to it by the state of California, with no sympathy for what's going on with the public in general and the hardworking people of Shafter in reality. And now we're going to add more to them. It's not going to sit too well with people. I'm going to let you guys know that right now.
We know that.
So like I said, education is going to be huge. When this, even right now, it needs to be getting put out there that this is not something we're doing in the city of Shafter. This is something that we're made to do from Sacramento on down. You know, a lot of people still won't understand, but people need to know that this is not the city doing this. You know, these are their elected officials from Sacramento doing this to them, not us. And that's something they need to know, and as soon as possible. That's just my comment.
And just on the regular agenda, there is an item related to the county proposed land increase to their landfill fee. That's why our position is that their timing is not suitable, because to that very point you just made with regard to how our residents are going to react. If the county's out doing their own and then we're going to follow right back, there's going to create a lot of confusion. And I think the residents, the ratepayers, are going to feel like, why am I paying more for it? Right. So we would agree with that. So I think as part of that action plan that we'll bring back to you is obviously include a community education component to that. And so that's a comprehensive approach to the residents.
Okay, if there are no other comments, we'll receive this report and we will adjourn to 6 o'clock meeting. Is that correct? Yes, okay. Do I need a motion? Please, may I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adjourn till 6. Adjourn this one and we'll reconvene at 6. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, no. We are adjourned.